Hello and welcome to another Walking Dead video. Today I'll be reviewing Fear the Walking Dead Season 7 Episode 12, Sonny Boy. And this episode is a John episode. I wasn't expected to be a John Dory Sr. episode because we kind of got that earlier in the season. That episode 4 I think was a John and June episode. But we got another John episode. And I'm quite happy because I like John. He's one of the few newer characters I like. There are a few like standout newer characters which are okay. But this is one of the few characters I like, and it's good to have another episode for John, and it works quite well. So the premise of this episode is that Baby Mo has gone missing, and it is basically down to John to try and find Baby Mo in the tower, and everyone suspects Howard because Howard's been found with walkie-talkies and basically contraband in his house. So it's kind of a race against time to who finds Baby Mo first, Howard or John. So it really focuses on those two characters. I really like it. It's good to see Strand. This episode is really good to show Strand as a full-blown villain. Strand does very villainous things this episode. It starts off with a monologue with Strand just throwing people off the roof. I thought that was cool. And I was like, yay, we're getting evil Strand. It's a shame it's quite late into the arc. We are getting this full-on Strand, but we are. And Strand does steal the show. There are some nonsensical things going on in this episode. But the premise of the episode is good because it's paced well. It is not filler. This is just pushing the story forwards. I feel like this should have been earlier in the season. This could have been maybe in episode 9 or in episode 8. In my opinion, they could have cut out that much content and this could have happened earlier in the season, not in episode 12, when I believe the arc's going to end about 2 to 3 episodes. Going back to the premise of the episode though, there is some issues with it, and I really like the idea of we get kind of a cop episode where John Dory is trying to figure out where Baby Mo is. But the problem is, it happens so fast he figures out who has Baby Mo in a matter of seconds. We get kind of this kind of just jump of all these like interviews of like John Dory being like, did you do it? Did you do it? And then he's like, gets to the other person and he's like, oh yeah, it's you. I just didn't like that. I thought it would have been a cooler episode if more of the episode was dedicated to the investigation aspects. If you want a lot of action in this episode, there is not much action. There are walkers, but they just kind of there a lot of the time. There's not much action, but that's just the downside. The action is lacking when I kind of want some action when we've had some bad episodes. The Daniel episode was good, but the 2 previous ones, I'm still like being thrashed and still affected and dragged by that episode. Those 2 episodes were so bad, I'm still feeling the effects of them. This episode does, though, massive bonus, give us an update on Charlie, and guess what? She's looking bad. So, yes, massive up for Charlie's gonna die soon, because she's in one shot, and she just screams to, like, June, and John's like, oh, is she okay? And he's like, nah. You see, she looks okay. So, I'm happy about that. There is some small issues. I feel like we could have had maybe a subplot in this episode. Like, if I was writing this episode, I would completely restructure this episode, to be honest. I would put more focus on the investigation aspect and had a subplot with maybe Howard trying to find it, so you have more of that race and more tension between them both finding it. Because what happens in the episode is there's a few interviews, then John immediately knows where it is, goes and finds it, and we get this stupid like kind of walker sewer fight between John and the walkers. I just thought it was kind of annoying because John has one gun, even though John Dory had 2, he only whips out 1, he shoots it, and like, why does he have 4 bullets in the gun? Another issue, I'll come back to this later, but John shoots 3 bullets, and he says he has 1 left, and it's like Chekhov's gun. He mentions he have a bullet left, and nothing happens to it, because later on, there's a thing where you're like, John, you have a bullet left, but he never does it. I will talk about it later, but that just really annoyed me, how they mentioned a gun has a bullet, and they just ignored it, and they forgot that the gun's loaded later on in this episode. Strand is also on point this episode. I wouldn't say that John's on point, because John does make some stupid decisions, as I mentioned with the gun, and I will go into more detail later, because it's connected to the end of this episode. I'll talk about the entire ending separately. But Strand's on point this episode. I really like Strand as a villain because he's like pitting John and Howard against each other to find out who's better so we can have a better lieutenant. And Howard, I just wanted more screen time. It would have been so much cooler if we had more screen time with Howard, because Howard's a really cool character and they just kind of done him dirty this episode in my opinion. Let's talk about some things I do not like about this episode. Going back to the gun that they mentioned earlier on. So in the episode, John Dory mentions he has 1 bullet left in his gun, but nothing ever happens to it. So there's a moment where John Dory whips out his gun, puts it to the back of Strand's head, and he has 1 bullet in the gun, remember? He just whacks him with it. Why? So John Dory's plan to just get rid of Strand, because basically Strand's using everyone. He's like, I need to get rid of Strand. So what does John Dory do? Well, he has to hit him in the head with a loaded gun, because bad writing. The writing is bad for just bad sake this episode. Even I, as somebody who tries to always see the goodness of Fear, because I just like Fear more than The Walking Dead, I couldn't defend him with a loaded gun hitting the main villain instead of shooting him. It's like when, like, those cyberpunk memes, when you run out of ammo, you throw the gun instead of reloading. I just got those vibes where he's like, oh no, I'm not going to shoot him, I'm going to pistol whip him. That really annoyed me. Just the nonsensicalness of the writing with John Dory. Like, he's a good character, and he was fun to watch this episode. But a lot of times he's doing leaps of faiths, and he's just connecting dots which we don't clearly see. I just didn't like it, and just that annoyed me so much. Just John Dory was good this episode, but is also bad this episode also. I do also want to watch June, because this is another episode where I'm like, June, you're kind of ruining the story, you're ruining the pacing a little. I didn't like June this episode. She was annoying. Her dialogue was just weird this episode. I just felt like she's weird, isn't it? She's been interrogated and she decides to talk about all this stuff. I'm like, oh, come on, June. You're a little annoying. I didn't like June's decisions. I just thought June was quite bad. There are some cool callbacks to Mickey from that Dwight episode, but she never came back, which is kind of annoying. I know she went to go direct some Walking Dead episodes, but she never came back to the show, which is weird. A one-off character. It was weird. But I just didn't like June. She was written badly this episode. She was annoying. She ruined the pacing. Just June was bad. She's just kind of a big hole in this episode. That's kind of ruined it for me. Also, I don't want to talk about Grace, because I feel like she should have a bigger role. She's just there in this episode, even though it's her child who's gone missing. She's only in a handful of scenes, and it focuses on June more. I know June and Jory are always connected, but I just feel like it should have been June and Grace as the pair this episode, and a subplot with Howard instead of just kind of everything he's doing is happening off screen. I didn't like that. And another thing I didn't like is Strand's like constant need to want this child for no reason. Like, I can't even understand why he wants it. Why can he not give it to Grace, then put Grace under lock and key? It's so simple. Why does he need the baby with him? No, you get Grace, you get the baby, you lock them in a room together, so you have both of them. Not just going like, okay, I want the baby, I don't care about Grace. Once if Grace escapes, then you've lost half of your leverage. I just didn't like that. It's just kind of some small itty bitty bits. There's also a plot twist in this episode, and I thought the plot twist was unneeded. It could have just gone on a different way. I just feel like the plot twist was cool in the moment, and it made sense for John Dory's character, but I just felt like it was unneeded. There is just a lot of wasted potential in this episode. I feel like John Dory could have had so much potential. Howard could have done so much more. Even Strand, just a lot of wasted potential in this episode. And there's a lot of just bad writing in general. However, it is still well paced, and it is still fun to watch. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look the best. I don't like the rain. The rain really annoys me, because if they're meant to be in a fallout, I swear rain brings the fallout down out of the sky, and this is only meant to take place a month or two, maybe 3 months after the fallout and all the nukes. So would the rain be bad? But no, they just stood in the rain a lot of the time. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere that rain, when it's raining in a nuclear fallout area, you stay inside because you don't want the rain to get on you, because the rain has the fallout in it. I just didn't. If that's wrong, I'm just not going to take back this complaint bit, and I'm just talking bad, just making stuff up. But if it's true, I just didn't like it. Was inconsistent then. Just there's a few inconsistencies. Now let's kind of talk about more of the ending and everything around the ending. So we get this full villain of Strand where he's using people, which I was like, cool, should have happened earlier on. But we also get some very big character deaths, and this is why I like Fear more than The Walking Dead sometimes, because The Walking Dead is very formatted with their deaths. Look at season 9, for example. The only character that died is Alden, and he died in a big season premiere. He died in episode 9. The Walking Dead likes to do deaths in either 1, 9, or 8, but they do a 9 a lot of the time now, or 16. That's how The Walking Dead runs. But Fear, because their arcs are structured differently, a lot of characters die in the middle episodes. So the way if we look back in earlier seasons, we might have had kind of John and Virginia in 8 and 9, put those back to back. And if you look at the character before that, that would have been Nick who died, and that was episode 3. This, we have some very big character deaths, and this is episode 12. I really like we're just getting mid-season deaths. And let's actually talk about them. Both deaths are quite cool. Like, I wasn't expecting 2 big character deaths. I was like, whoa! And the way Fear the Walking Dead is set up, a lot of other character deaths, like I think maybe Daniel or Louisiana or Charlie is going to die. Like either all 3 or 2 of those characters are going to die. This is going to look like one of the bloodiest seasons so far. And with them obviously changing filming locations, it makes sense to dump a bunch of cast. So it's going to be quite a bloody back half. I am excited to see how a lot of these more characters are going to die because they set up so many character deaths. So I am excited. I am starting to believe Strand won't die because how many characters they set up to die. But I'm excited. So let's go back to the actual deaths themselves. So both deaths are shocking and cool. However, both deaths move on way too fast. They have the World Beyond habit of, oh, death, move on to the next scene. We're not going to linger on it. And it just, the way John Dory's death worked so well in season 6 is because it lingered on that death. The whole ending is about that death. But the 2 deaths in this episode were just, bam, it's over, let's move on to the next scene. I didn't like that. They were both good, but I didn't like how fast and rushed they were. The first death was the most shocking, and that one was kind of the most rushed because it was like, boom, boom, done. I don't know how they could have stretched that one out. But the second death is the most egregious with the, let's forget, because, so a character is walking through the horde, and basically, they die. And what I didn't like about that is that after the character gets through the horde, and then they die, it just kind of shows them walking back into the horde, and then bam, cut off. It'd be cool if we saw them get ripped apart. No, it's just like, we just saw them walk into the horde, bam, and that's it. You're like, no, come on, The Walking Dead's known for being gory. Why are we not seeing gore on this show? I just didn't like how the death was just, screw it, he's dead. We're not going to watch the gore. We're going to merely focus on Morgan and Strand having a conversation over a long distance. And it just takes away from the big deaths, and we just don't get any emotion from it. It just feels more trivial. And you're like, no, it's not a big moment. We don't care. They did a World Beyond, and I didn't like it. I felt like we should have felt the death. We should have stayed with the death, not just focus on Strand and Morgan talking about the start of the war. Even though the war technically started back in episode 8 and nothing's happened since then. I just didn't like that. This episode happened way too late in the season, I believe. Just, there's a lot of issues with this ending. I just didn't like. The second death should have been so big. I'm so caught up on how it should have been a bigger thing. But no, they just didn't care. The writing wasn't the best this episode. So let's move on to my 1 sentence, 1 word overall view. So this episode is way better than 9 and 10. It is a good episode. It's better than a lot of the episodes we have got this season because it focuses on the story. It's paced well. It focuses on characters we like. It's not like half the episodes we've got so far where they're terrible, like episode 9, episode 10. I'm pretty sure 6 and 5, something like that. Those 2 episodes are terrible as well. But this episode focuses on a character we like. So I can't say this is a bad episode. The writing is nonsensical at points, and they forget plot threads they are dropping throughout the episode, and I didn't like it. They also mention radiation, and then that just gets dropped again. I just didn't like how certain characters got certain things. It's just, there's a lot of issues with the writing. The main issue with this episode is the writing and how they had to force something going down a small path, and they had this entire thing they had to go out, and always different events. And then I was like, no, we want this one unlogical ending for this episode, so they push down this ending no matter how little sense it makes. So this can't be a great episode. This is not as good as previous episode, but it's way better than the previous 2 episodes before that. So I would just have to say it's a good episode with lots of flaws. There is just a lot going on in this episode, and if you turn off your brain, you can enjoy it. If you just be like, I'm just going to watch this and not think about anything and forget anything they set up, like having a loaded gun, you could enjoy this episode if you just turn off your brain. So it is an enjoyable and watchable episode, unlike a lot of Fear the Walking Dead Season 7 episodes. It is a good time with just issues. Just don't use your brain, is how I'm going to say it. But please tell me down below, what do you think about this episode? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And tell me, what do you think about the big deaths? Did you like them? Did you not like them? Do you think they're quite basic? Because they set up one death for one of the characters, and I'm like, oh no, because Charlie's getting that death. And I liked how they kind of changed it. They just been like, nah mate, we're going to bam, change it to this death instead. I thought it was cool. I was watching someone, they're like, why did they that's such a wimpy way to die? And I'm like, nah, because they can't have 2 characters die exactly the same. Me saying that has been very hypocritical because they've already done that with Nick and John. They died exactly the same by a child shooting them. So they could have easily done that with one of the deaths, but please tell me down below. And if you want more Walking Dead content, look on the screen. If you want to see the previous review, look in the top right. And I will see you later. If you want more Walking Dead content, feel free to subscribe. And I will talk to you at a later date. Goodbye.